All right, I'm back. Just wanted to give everybody a little bit more time to log in. I know sometimes people are running from meeting to meeting and, just logging in. I didn't want anybody to miss any of this session. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining. As I mentioned just a moment ago, this is Scott Fiaschetti from Geopath, and I'm here with, as always, Brian Shopper from Geopath doing these sessions with me. And also we have a new addition to the team, Luke Barnwell, who's not so new anymore. He's been with Geopath for about 4 or 5 months now, but his first webinar he's conducting with us. So with these kind of member-driven Insight Suite trainings that we do, if you recall from the past, Brian will drive the walkthrough, but I'll be here to add color commentary and monitor the questions, as will Luke, and we'll be popping in with different questions that may be coming in. But that said, just a quick couple housekeeping things and just kind of what to expect from the rest of today. So overall, we're really excited to relaunch these sessions. Overall, our out-of-home office hour sessions, getting them going monthly again, but also in particular these Insight Suite training sessions. These are often one of our more highly attended sessions. I think there's always a certain level of questions that people have around the tool, and we want to make sure our members are able to use the tool and answer any questions. So just overall, we want to be able to highlight some specific features, give people some tips and tricks on how to use the tool, some things that we've learned as we go through to help you navigate and maneuver through the tool a little more quickly. And also, oftentimes on these sessions, there are a lot of new members joining. So this may be one of the first times or of the first times that they're seeing the tool or even in the tool. So we want to make sure we're answering questions. And that's the key thing today, about answering any questions. And, and as you hopefully saw with our communications, we wanted to take a different tack with these. We oftentimes are having a scenario in our head and we kind of walk through the scenario. We wanted to see what questions you all have and use that to guide the session. So first time we're doing this, so hopefully it works out well. We did get a handful of questions, so we'll try to address those questions first. But again, feel free to add questions as we're going along. And if you can, please put them in the question widget versus the chat. Sometimes it gets a little hard to maneuver between the two as we're in the background trying to facilitate the question. So if you could put them in the Q&A, great. If it ends up in the chat, not the end of the world, we'll figure it out. But we definitely want to be able to answer as many questions as we can today. And so without further ado, love to just get to answering some questions. So I'm going to hand it off to Brian, and he'll take over the screen and start doing the walkthrough. And like I said, be walking through based on some of the questions that we received prior to the session. But again, I'll be monitoring questions. Luke will be monitoring questions in the background. So feel free to add them if something comes up as you're going along. And we'll pop in. If the question is very contextual to what's being shown on the screen, we'll pop in and try to ask it right in the moment so it seems more relevant. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it off to Brian. Oops.
All right, sounds good. Scott, can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Perfect. All right, hi everyone. So yeah, like Scott said, it's been a little bit since we've done one of these. And basically, we sent around in the invite to this, we sent around a survey kind of asking for user submitted questions. And so I've used the responses from that to kind of fill out a scenario that I want to work through today. So I'm going to use this scenario that goes across the Insight Suite here as kind of the vehicle to answer these questions. This will serve as kind of a general overview of how to use the Insight Suite. I'm going to point you towards some helpful tips, tricks, things like that. But also there's about 5 or 6 different questions that I'm going to use this example to address. And then there's one more at the end that I couldn't really fit into this example. So I have a second minor example. And before I get started as well, like Scott said, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to just throw them in the Q&A widget. And I'll try to jump in if they, if they apply to the part that we're working on right there, we can do it then or come back to them at the end. So the scenario that I wanted to work through today started, it's starting in the Explore module here. I want to work in the St. Louis DMA. I picked this one. I haven't really done this as an example before. but I wanted to start there. So within this Define Target tab, you have three different options here. We can select our audience from here, assign our market, and also change the delivery weeks that we're looking at. By default, in the Insights suite, everything shows as 1 week metrics, but if you prefer to keep it at 4 or 8 or 12, you could do that as well. So let's start with the market selection. And again, I'm going to be kind of talking this through as if it's a general walkthrough and then using these questions to guide it. So some of you may have heard me explain these kind of things, but there's a few things in here that I want to highlight that I think are really useful things to know as you're navigating the tool. So when you're assigning your market, you can do it at the DMA, CBSA, or county level, and you can also make combinations within these. This is especially useful if you're at the county level. So since I'm using St. Louis, let's look at Missouri. So if you wanted to use the county selection, this will help you make a custom geography that can be smaller than a CBSA. You can combine a handful of different counties or even just 2, and then basically look at the audience of those specific geographies instead of just a DMA or CBSA. But I'm going to select the St. Louis DMA for this. St. Louis, here we go. And there's one point I want to call out as I'm going through this. So the assign market function is capable of doing 2 things at once. And I just want to highlight what the real core functionality of this is. The first thing that probably comes to mind when you're assigning your market is that this will filter your inventory to whatever market you apply. And that's certainly something that it does. But as far as the overall sort of structure here goes, that's not really the core thing of what it's doing first. The real true first thing that this is doing is this is actually setting our universe base of people. So in this example here, by using the St. Louis DMA, this is going to constrain our in-market and out-of-market audience to just those that live within the St. Louis DMA. So anytime I'm looking at in-market impressions going forward, that'll be just those that live in the St. Louis DMA. Any out-of-market impressions are impressions on units in the DMA, but coming from outside or from people who live outside the DMA. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this is because as you're adding your markets here, you'll notice there's a pop-up that appears when you go to apply. And this is basically just asking you if you want to also apply the same market to your inventory filter. So in this case, I'm going to take this St. Louis DMA and apply it to both my audience base and also my inventory filter by pressing yes here. And so now I'm only looking at St. Louis inventory, and my in-market audience base is just constrained to those that live within this DMA. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in and add an audience. And this audience came just as part of an example question. So someone is like, hey, I have this audience. How would I do this kind of thing? So I'm going to go to the audience selection. And what I'm doing here is just going to be using this population category. So we're looking for 18 plus and, 18 to 34, my mistake, 18 to 34. And household income of 100,000 plus. Here we go. And I'm going to apply that here. And also, so far, I'm still looking at everything in the market here. So I want to narrow this down a little bit more as far as the inventory type goes. So for any different piece of filtering that you want to do, you can use this filter inventory tab to do that. And there are a variety of different ways that you can actually filter. I'm going to go just based on the media type in particular. So within this media and placement filter, there are several different ways that you can get to the same results with these filters. I like to recommend this operator media name oftentimes. This is useful for a few different reasons, but it just makes it very clear which media type you're selecting, and you can do it with one click. Like, for example, digital bulletins and bulletins are separate items here, very distinct from each other. And I can click one or the other with just a single click and pull up that media type. You can accomplish the same result with these other filters as well. It's really just a matter of what you're trying to do with this particular scenario. So let me do, for this one, posters, and I'll do transit shelters.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in. There's a quick question just before we get too far away from the audience, setting up the audience. Yep. And the question was, how can we combine age groups? And I know the answer to it, but so currently you can't combine different age groups together. You can do crosstabs at the level that Brian has shown here, with some around the demographic, the more population-based metrics. We're working towards more crosstab functionality, so being able to combine, whatever, males 18 to 34 that are a certain prison segment or things like that. So that we're working on it. The goal is to have it available to our members with the fall release, later this fall. So,
yep, that's a great question.
Yeah, good question. So often one that we get too. So thank you.
Right, and to Scott's point, you can't currently combine different age groups here. But some of them have a larger range than others. Like I was using 18 to 34 here, but this does go 18 to 64. So depending on what audience you select, you might be able to get the range of people that you need, because there are some different variations of these age ranges. So you might be able to get what you need from what's here, but like Scott said, we can't currently combine beyond what's available. So let me just reapply this. Okay, so 18 to 34, 100,000. Okay, and I've also at this point applied posters and transit shelters as my media type. So one thing I wanted to talk about really quick before I keep moving. Perfect. Okay. So whenever I'm doing a walkthrough, I always like to take a second to talk about this spot summary list. I think this is a really useful gauge of just the overall audience delivery of what's going on here. So the spot summary list you're seeing in this top right corner, this always reflects the filters that, or the spots that are currently in your filter. In this case, just under 1,400 spots. And I just wanted to briefly just talk through some of these numbers. I'm sure most of you know this as well, but it doesn't hurt to have a quick refresher. So anytime you're in the Insight Suite and you see total impressions or total persons, it always refers to person 0+. So in this instance, this 89 million impression number, there are 89 million impressions on all 1,400 of these units in a given week. And that 89 million includes people of any demographic because it's person 0+, and it also includes people coming from any market. So that in-market, out-of-market audience base that we set up earlier, because this is just the total number, that doesn't really come into play here. If we move one to the right and we're now looking at total in-market, this is still person 0+ because it's total, but now we're looking at our in-market impressions. So the St. Louis DMA starts to constrain our audience a little bit here. So about a 5 million out-of-market draw on all of these units, just kind of going based on the difference between these two. And then going one more to the right, now we're looking at our target in-market. So this is specifically our audience that we applied, so 18 to 34, 100,000 plus, and those that live within the St. Louis DMA. So this 4.9 million number is the impressions coming from that group within this DMA in a given week. And I just kind of wanted to talk through that briefly so everyone has kind of a general sense of that. But one of the other points that I wanted to bring up, and this actually comes from one of the questions we got, was, if I'm seeing an index that's sort of high, in the high hundreds or, 300 or above, how do I understand that? How do I explain or understand index in general? An index is a really useful metric when you're trying to compare something to the average. So you can think of index as based around 100 being the average. And you can see this group of, again, 1,400 spots here. This group collectively actually under indexes for reaching this audience target. So this has an index of 78. So this under indexes by about 22%. So this is about 22% below average in the market for reaching this audience, or this group of units is about 22% below average. That doesn't necessarily mean that these are bad units, or this doesn't necessarily mean that these units are not efficient at reaching your audience. It just means that you might not be as efficiently reaching this audience as the average unit in the market. And again, when you look at the unit by unit level, you find some that are significantly highly indexing compared to the entire group here. And as I dive into this a little bit more, you see what I mean. But the question that we got specifically was like, if I have a really high index, what does that mean? Or how do I sort of explain that? And generally speaking, the more narrow your audience base, the harder it can be to reach or to index highly against that audience. But when you do have a unit that does index well against that audience, it can index very highly. So like in this market here, we're looking at the entire marketplace. We're looking at 18 to 34, 100,000 plus, somewhat of a narrow audience, but not super narrow. If we were to get even more specific with this, and if we were looking at like a county level as opposed to a DMA, we could find in the units that reach that audience well, you could end up finding indexes that are much higher than you'd see at this level, just because we've constrained our audience base even further. We've, brought it down from, say, a DMA down to a county, and from an audience like this, maybe down to persons 21 to 24, which is a much more narrow window. So index is a useful metric just to kind of see where you are compared to the average. Just because something under indexes doesn't mean that it's bad. Just because something over indexes really well, it might point you in the right direction, but there are other things to consider as well with that. But just kind of a general few talking points to think about when you're looking at indexes.
Right.
And to that point, this actually brings me to another question that we got in preparation for this. Someone basically asked, I have all these boards in my filter here. How do I find the boards that are best at reaching whatever target I have applied? And there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but since I was just talking about index, I'll use that as my example here. So you can see I've still got this group of 1,400 units. And at this point, I can use this sort by dropdown to help reorder these for myself based on a handful of different metrics. You can see by default, this is set to target composition percentage. And this is the percent of the target impressions or target in market impressions over the total impressions, total in market. So this target composition percentage number, for example, just based on the numbers up here, that would be this 4.9 divided by the 84 million. Another way you can look at it is the percent of your impressions that are coming from your audience, from your target audience. So that's what it defaults to here. But I can sort this by composition percentage. So, target composition percentage versus in-market target. I can also sort this by index or TRPs or reach or frequency. But for the sake of our example, since we were just talking about index, let me use this index filter. And again, the question was, how can I use the tool to help find the units that are best for reaching my audience target? And best is hard to say because it's a little subjective, but like you can look at, efficiency as far as index or target composition percentage, and you can use that as kind of a guiding metric. So you can see this is now resorted all of my spots in my filter, now showing the highest indexing units up here. So 145, 134, 133. So some of these significantly above the 100 index average, but also much higher above this overall average of 78. So kind of going back to my point, just because the overall group under indexes, there are oftentimes a handful of units or maybe a large portion of units that do highly index for it. So now that I've got this sorted based on, it could be anything, but in this case, index, I'm going to use this select dropdown, and I can actually have this show me the top 25, 50, or 100 units based on whatever my sort here is. So if I set this to 100, this will show me the top 100 indexing units for reaching this audience target. And before I keep going with this, just a little helpful tip that I wanted to add in here. You can see I've got all these grayed out dots on my map here. You can actually change that setting so it displays a more clean map once you've removed things from your filter. So if you go to this Layers and Display Options tab up here, and you go over to Display Options, you have a bunch of different options here for how your map setup is put together. And so I can actually, this show selected or show unselected inventory option is turned on. I can remove this and then hit apply. And that'll basically just clear out all of those extra points on my map. So this gives me a lot more of a clean map to work with once you've done your filtering. But so we've got now this group of 100 units that we can start with and really start to look through at a more fine detail. But to answer that one question, this is one of the ways that you can go about using the tool to point you towards units that might best deliver for your audience. And again, it really depends on what the RFP calls for. Different scenarios require different metrics and different outputs. So index might be useful for you in this. Sometimes you're just looking for target impressions. Sometimes you want to reach the most, as much of your target audience as you can. So maybe reach would be the sort metric that you use. But really, depending on what the scenario calls for, you can use a variety of different ways to get to this kind of thing.
And hey, Brian, I just wanted to jump in and one, I want to echo exactly what you were saying. I was going to jump in earlier, but yeah, it's exactly that. As you're planning, you may have a mix even within your group of inventory, right? You may want some that are highly indexing, while some that are generating a lot of impressions, just general impressions, and others that maybe have a lot of reach. So it's really, to your point, what you said, it's really looking at the goals of what you're trying to do and seeing what kind of grouping of inventory really helps to achieve the goals. Before we move on, at some point there was a question in the chat or in the Q&A about auditing airports in the near future. And we definitely do audit airports, and there are some already in the Insight Suite. And just if we can at some point kind of show everyone where those might be if they're looking for that type of inventory, that'd be great.
Sure. Yep, I can definitely do that. Okay. So the whole time that I've been doing this example so far, I've really just mainly been working with this right-hand menu. But I always like to, at this point in my walkthroughs, I like to show people the way to access the table view and how that can kind of open up a different level of thinking about what you're looking at here. So there are two different ways you can get to that. You can use this View as Table button that's up here. There's also an up arrow in the bottom left corner of the map. Either one will open the table. But so if I do View as Table, I can then just drag this up. And now I'm looking at all of these different spot by spot metrics for whatever's in my filter. So you can see these are the 100 units that I had selected. And a lot of this stuff is, like at the front part of this report especially, a lot of this is specific to the media itself. So not necessarily measurement based, but about what it is and where it is. So I can start to scroll over here. And again, your layout might be different than this. This is just how mine is set up. But if I scroll over here, I can then look at spot by spot metrics for each of these units. And what's really nice about this view as well, that I don't think a lot of people know, each of these metric headers are actually sort enabled, basically. So you can use these to resort what you're looking at. So if you remember when I was in that sort by dropdown on the right-hand menu, I selected sort by index. So you can see that reflected here. But you can also, without using that sort by dropdown, you can achieve the same effect using these other headers here. Yeah. And I should also mention, you can actually export from this view as well. It's a question I get a lot. So if you use this Save As dropdown right here, you have a bunch of options within this, but you can download a CSV, and this will basically give you an export that looks exactly like this, same column order, same everything. And it'll include whatever spots you have selected. So here, this would be 100 spots. And you can use this for getting spot by spot metrics. It's really useful for that kind of thing. And what this doesn't do in the Explore module, and I want to make it really clear because this is an important distinction, this will not present you anything as if it's a package or a campaign. The spot summary list here, it's very much just a list of different spots and their specific spot by spot metrics. So this is useful like if you're trying to compare the individual impression amounts for certain boards, or if you're just trying to get the impressions for a single unit or a few different units, this is useful for that kind of as a reference. But again, this doesn't look at this as if it's a campaign. That's something that we'll do in the workspace module once we head over there.
Right. Brian, just one point of clarification, a question
Yes.
came in. When you're doing the top 100 or 50 or 25, question is it deduping essentially the digital unit? So is there just one spot for a digital unit, or are all represented in that top? If there is a digital unit and that has 8 spots, will all 8 be represented in that top 100?
Yes, it's possible that they would all be represented, or I guess likely if they all have the same delivery. Yes, currently in the system as it is right now, it treats each of those different spots as like a different record in that list of 100.
Right. But you could, in theory, though, you could essentially come into this portion of the tool and click off those other 6 or 7 flips if you wanted to, potentially. As somewhat of a workaround. I know it's not an exact workaround, but that's a potential way to work around it.
Absolutely. So before I move on from here and move over to Workspace, there are a couple different things that I wanted to just highlight really quick. So, say I've done my filtering and these are the 100 units that I want to use in my I want to report on these. Basically just kind of taking what I have here, I want to move this over to workspace and get a campaign level reach and frequency for this kind of thing. There are a couple different ways that you can do that for yourself. Again, depends on what you're trying to do in your scenario. Sometimes it might be easiest for you to export this to Excel from here, maybe work with some of the data in Excel. You can make further selections offline there if that's a little bit easier for you to work in Excel rather than filter with these. So that's kind of one option, and then you can grab the IDs and use those to run your report. You can also, in the same Save As dropdown, you can save something as an inventory set to your account, which is what I'm going to do here for example's sake. So new inventory set. And you can just kind of name them whatever you need to, so you're able to reference them later. So St. Louis 18 to 34, 100,000 plus. So what this is essentially doing, whatever's currently in your filter, and for me here, it's this group of 100 spots. I can set this aside as an inventory set to my account. So if I were to come back tomorrow, I'm working with a fresh map, I can really easily call up this group of 100 without having to do all this other filtering. So that's one thing that you can do with it. It also makes it much easier to run a report on this in Workspace if it's already saved to your account as an inventory set. And finally, also, you can use it as a mappable option. So in the same layers and display options tab, and I'm not going to get too down into the weeds with this, but all of these things in this available layers section, these are all things that you can add to your map as mappable layers. So all of my saved inventory sets can be added here. So if you're trying to compare like maybe a group of units that were high indexing versus a group of units that had a high reach percentage, you can add those and color code them and all that kind of thing. But basically having something saved to your account as an inventory set makes it a lot easier to work with it within the system here. One thing I want to mention as well, rather than going manually, you can go over to Workspace and set your plan up by hand and then add the inventory. You also have an option here to save something as a scenario. And this works at both the market plan or inventory plan level. So you can use this setup, like inventory plan will take this group of 100 units and your audience and your market and all that. If you set this up as a market plan, because it's not looking at specific units, it would just take whatever media types you have here and the audience in the market. So you can use this to pretty easily translate your work from the Explore module over to Workspace. I'm not going to do that for the sake of this example right now, because I want to show a couple things in the setup over there. So I have that saved to my account. Oh, right, before I move on, I want to show that place-based airports example. So I'm just going to so if you go to actions and you do clear view and then reset all, this will just wipe your session here and you'll get a fresh map to start over. So to the question earlier about airport measurement, airports fall into our place-based category. So you can think of place-based as anything that's in venue. It also includes things that are not necessarily traditional out of home. And the reason I clarify it that way is because certain things like electric vehicle charging stations or gas station pump TVs, those are also considered place-based, but they're not necessarily in a venue. But it could be anything from like kiosks in a mall to ATM displays in 7-Elevens or something like that. Anything like that that's kind of in a venue or not traditional roadside media, that would fall into the place-based category, and that includes airports. Formerly, something that we would call, well, I guess, never mind. I was going to say station interior. That applies for fleet and transit, but not for airports. So in this filter inventory tab, under media and placement, this first filter right here, you have this media class filter, and this lets you select what type of overall media you're looking at. So roadside, place-based, and then fleet. So if I wanted to just filter for place-based, I can do that. And this will then pull up everything that is place-based media specifically. And then you can see down here, these last three filters are specific to place-based in particular. So place type, this is useful if you're trying to, you can see here right at the top, airport concourse, airport terminal. This is useful if you're trying to select like what venue type you're looking at. The placement type helps you select where within the venue you're looking. So airport gate, for example, or I think baggage. I know baggage claim is one of them. So baggage claim, if that's where your displays are. And then also in place name, you can use this to filter to a specific place by name. So if it's a particular airport like O'Hare, Chicago O'Hare, so you have all of these different options for particular places that you can search for. So that's how I would recommend filtering down to these different media types. Yeah, Scott, any more questions before I keep moving? Okay. All right, I'll keep moving. So I'm going to hop over to the workspace module now and just kind of keep going with that example that we were just doing. And just kind of as a brief overview, there are two different areas that you can do your work in when you're working in workspace here. The sandbox and projects environment. So projects, this is a much more structured view. You can think of each of these like different folders, and you have, within these, I have different projects and just different scenarios within each of these. So the project's useful if you're trying to be a little bit more organized with things. And then the sandbox view is a little bit more loose in structure. It's kind of one big project, and you just make all of your work in this area. You can do the exact same things in both environments. So you can start in one place and move it to another place later. Like if I wanted to move this over to a project, I can do that. Or if I wanted to go into this one and rename it and then move it or create a new project, I can do all that stuff after the fact. So if you're trying to get in here and just kind of start a plan, you can work in either sandbox or projects and then just add a new scenario in either place. So let's focus on the market plan example that I was just doing. One of the questions that we got in preparation for this was, how do I get reach and frequency and TRPs and things like that at the package level? And I kind of alluded to this a little bit when we were in Explore, that you could only look at the spot by spot level in Explore. But what you'd want to do to get reach and frequency and TRPs and things like that at the package level, you'd want to come and run an inventory plan on all of those things. So I'm going to set this up just kind of mirroring what we were doing in Explore a second ago. But actually, a little tip that I like to tell people here, when you're setting up your inventory plan, a lot of times it's really useful to actually start with your inventory. You can see it's the furthest one over as far as these are concerned. But by starting with your inventory, you can actually basically satisfy 3 out of 4 of these in one step, because as you add your inventory, the system knows that it exists in a particular market, and it knows that it belongs to a specific operator. So by starting with inventory, you can kind of satisfy these 3 all at once. Let me show you add inventory. So there are 4 main different ways that you can add your inventory, although I don't really recommend the select attributes one. You can use this if you're trying to sort of, like, say you wanted to pull all of the posters in a particular market or all of the transit shelters of a certain type. You can do that using the select attribute filters. I don't necessarily recommend that because with you might not know which filters you're putting on. You could end up with a plan that has thousands upon thousands of spots without realizing it. So I think it's best at this point if you already have inventory selected. So if you have the spot IDs of the units you want to use for your plan, you can paste them in here as either the Geopath ID or the operator ID. This from file upload, this is a really useful feature. And this is actually I mentioned at the beginning, there's an additional question that's kind of a separate little walkthrough that I wanted to add at the end. I'm going to show how to use this from file upload to put together a more complex plan. That's another way that you can upload your inventory, but again, I'll revisit that one. And then you can also pull in any of your saved inventory sets. So you can see this is that one that I just saved a few minutes ago, St. Louis 18 to 34, 100,000 plus income. And as I go to apply my selections, it's going to ask me how I want to assign the market for this inventory. So I was looking at just inventory within the St. Louis DMA. So I know that this is DMA level that I want, and I know that it's just a singular DMA. So what I'm going to do is do DMA and then add as individual. But say you were working with inventory that was spread across a few different counties, you could add, as you add your inventory set, you could select county and then hit add as group, and then it would reflect the collective group of counties that inventory covers. But for this scenario here, I'm just going to do DMA and add as individual. And so you can see that added targeted markets here. It's got my inventory over here. Even though it's not showing, it does know the operator information, but in this case, it wouldn't really matter to add it as well because I'm looking at several operators here. Let me go and add my audience as well. And I'll add a secondary audience. I'll add like 18 plus and then the other one that we're working with, just so you can see a little bit how the system handles when you have multiple audiences. So 18 to 34, household income, 1,000 plus, apply selected. So let me just do a quick double check. Oh, and right. So the last thing I need to do is then set up my campaign length. So I have the option to set this to any of these preset numbers of weeks, but I can also change this to specific and use actual calendar dates to, this is really useful if you have like maybe it's a campaign that runs for 3 weeks, not 4 or 2, or 5 weeks for that matter, or something that's not even in the structure of an actual full week. Maybe it's like 6.5 week long campaign and you wanted to plot that out here. You can use the calendar dates to set this up. And the second example that I'm going to do with that CSV file upload, that'll use the start date and end dates. So I'm going to come back to that. So let's say this is just a 4-week campaign. I've got 18 plus audience, 18 to 34, 100,000 household income, St. Louis market. I've got my inventory set here, 4 weeks. All this looks good to me. And basically the last thing you can do here, if you want to, again, this is all optional, you can leave this in the sandbox or place it in some of your projects. You can add a scenario name if you want, but it will auto-generate a name for you. Or you can also add a description. Again, this entire bottom line is all optional. So this all looks good to me, and I'm going to hit generate. Oh, 1 sec. You know, this actually happened to me yesterday. This sometimes happens if I'm doing a walkthrough and I'm taking too long to explain the setup of what I'm doing. Sometimes time's out. So I'm just going to really quick redo this. So add the audience or add the inventory. Add the audience of 18 plus. 18 to 34, household income, 100,000, where are we? There we go. I'll remove 0 plus again, and then this was 4 weeks. So let me just do a quick double check.
And just while you're double checking that, Brian, I know there's been a lot of questions in the chat about, you know, reach and frequency and how you get to these numbers for a package. And hopefully it didn't specifically call them out. Hopefully these are answering your questions. If not, please just post, you know, say, hey, no, that's not exactly what I needed, because we want to make sure we get you an answer to what you need. There's also been 2 questions about essentially transit media, so buses, bus side inventory. And just so you know, that is coming. It's not in the Insight Suite just yet, but it will be coming, and that is part of the release that will be coming in the fall, so in the November timeframe. So we'll be there, and we'll also do a bunch of training around that and how you can work with that within the Insight Suite. So just wanted to, I know there was 2 questions already on that, so I wanted to make sure we got to those.
Yep. Yeah. Great question. And in addition to doing trainings and stuff on that, like we'll definitely do at least 1 webinar. I would imagine more than 1.
Yep.
But also we have kind of a plan laid out for how we're going to attack that for the as far as like training materials go. So like tutorial videos and user guides and 1-pagers. So we'll have plenty of stuff ready for that before anything comes out. So no one will have unanswered questions that they won't have resources for. Okay, so this is all set running. So I'm going to open up my plan here and just take a look. And this is a point I wanted to, basically the whole reason I added a separate audience in here, because I wanted to show how this looks when you have multiple audiences in your plan. So when you're working in an inventory plan like this, or even a market plan, and you have multiple audiences or multiple markets, it will separate each difference in the plans as a separate sub-plan. So we have plan 1A, 1B. If I had a third audience, 1C, 1D, etc. So you can see these are the summary level metrics. So if I needed to get like TRPs or reach and frequency for the entire campaign, like here are my TRPs. And again, these are 100 units and also very highly indexing for this, or at least for this audience target. So I expect kind of a high delivery. Like we very much so cherry picked this example. So these are going to be some crazy deliveries here, but so there are my TRPs for the entire package. Here's the reach and the frequency, or wait, where's frequency? Here we go. So reach and frequency and reach net. This is also, I want to talk about ReachNet for a second. So ReachNet's a really useful metric. We sometimes get asked questions about deduplicated reach, or sorry, deduplicated impressions or unique reach. This ReachNet number is the unique number of different people within your audience target and within your market that saw that saw this campaign in the time frame. So of the 18 plus audience, we saw there was about 715,000, and of that 18 to 34, 100,000 plus, there are about 97,000 different unique individuals of our audience target within the market that saw this campaign. So one of the things I wanted to address, this was another question that we got, was, I have this, I ran this plan, I have all these columns here, but I don't see the metrics that I need. Like, how do I go about adding other things to this report? So if you are in your inventory plan like this, there are these 3 buttons up on the top right here. This parameters button, which, just as a quick aside, this is really useful. You can access this at any point in your plan. And this lets you completely reconfigure the plan from the inside out. So if you wanted to add an additional audience, I could do that. If I wanted to change what market or what plan period I'm looking at, I could do that. I could even, sometimes most importantly, I could also swap out what inventory I'm looking at for this. So say you run your report and maybe there are certain units in the plan that either index really low or have a low target impression and you wanted to try out some other ones. You can go in and add additional units. And then when you hit this regenerate option, it'll give you the option to either replace existing or add those units to your existing set. So you'll have pretty good control of what you're doing here. All of this to say, once you run a plan, you're by no means locked into what you ran here. It's not static. It's very much a dynamic plan. So back to the question of customizing columns, this middle option here will give you the ability to do what you need to do there. So if you have plan summary selected, this is looking at the summary level metrics for the entire campaign. So these 2 bars that I have right here, you can see these are all of the columns that I have added in. There's a couple more I can add in. If I go over to media detail view, this is now looking at the body of the report itself. So the columns in view, these are all the things I already have added in. And then these are all the other columns that I can add into my report. And so if I were to make a change in there, it would affect both plans. Like, so if I changed either the headers for the summary metrics, or if I changed the headers that I have in the body of the reports themselves, that would apply to every plan in your plan here. So that would go to 1A, 1B, 1C. And you can use that to just kind of tailor fit it a little bit better to what data you need out of this. Before I keep moving, let me just double check. I think, yep, okay. So one of the other questions that we got was the difference in the CSV and the Excel exports. You'll notice over here, when I go to this export option, I have CSV and I have Excel options here. Generally speaking, for the most part, the data that you get out of both of these is very in line with each other. There are a couple things that if you go and you export as a CSV, you might not get if you do export as Excel. Like, there are a couple things in your view here that might not export as CSV. I think that's something that we're actually working on, so there's more parity between the two. But either way, there are some benefits to either of these. And I guess it really depends on what type of project you're working on. So if you were to select the CSV, just kind of by the nature of how CSV files work, they can only contain one sheet within them. So when you do this CSV export, each plan that you have here, so 1A, 1B, 1C, each of these would export as a separate CSV file. If I were to select this Excel option, this would all export as one CSV file with multiple tabs within it. So you'd get one tab in the Excel file that has basically just a summary option that looks exactly like this. So you get the summary data, and then the next column over, the next table over, the next sheet, there we go. The next sheet in Excel would be basically the spot by spot metrics for your units. So all that to say, if you have a plan like I do here that has multiple plans within it, it's a little bit more useful or a little bit more direct in comparison to use the Excel export. Again, there's no reason to not use the CSV export. I think it just makes it a little bit easier if you're trying to compare multiple plans at once. However, some people, and myself included, sometimes I do want them separated because it makes it a little bit easier to kind of separate the data and sort through it piece by piece. So again, you can kind of make a case for either of these. It really depends on what you're needing to do with it. But generally speaking, if you have more than one plan, I recommend the Excel export. I want to pause real quick before I keep going. Are there any other questions that have come in? Because basically the next thing I wanted to do was just go into that other quick example. So I wanted to talk through that as well.
Yeah, Brian, super fast. Another question regarding reach. Someone's asking, how reliable is it currently?
What do you mean?
So I think, so Brian, I was just going to jump in. Just, I think it'd be good to speak to some of the work we're doing with the reach.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's definitely, it is, so I'll let you speak to that and jump in.
Yeah, sure. So over the last several months, we have been doing a lot of work on the overall reach and frequency approach. Some of the people on this call actually, or on this webinar today, might be part of that ongoing process. So we have been working with what we're calling the Reach and Frequency Task Force to address some of the known issues that are going on with the current reach forecast, or the current reach approach, basically. In certain packages, or in certain instances at the package level, there are instances where there was either high reach kind of capped out by a single unit, like say for example, this group of 100 spots, for example. There were instances where there would be like one spot in this plan that had the same reach percent as the overall plan. Basically, that one unit had kind of capped out the reach, the entire plan, and incremental reach wasn't being added beyond that reach percent. So that was one of the issues that we identified. And then the other one, and this particularly happened, if I'm remembering right, in the case of in the case of like street furniture, where there would be low or underreported reach, but a very high frequency number. So there were those kind of two different use cases where we saw a need to readdress the reach and frequency approach. So we've been working on that with this task force that I mentioned over the last several months, basically going, without getting into too much detail on it, going through this model approach to that's informed by observed reach data to help better understand the duplication of audience and the way that coverage overlaps happen. So that was kind of part of the issue, is that audience duplication and audience coverage were not compiling as they should at the package level. So the observed reach data has helped with that and given us kind of a ground truth number to use in building these models to help with this new reach and frequency approach. So everyone who is on the task force and has been on for the last several months, we've been going through testing with them and testing out different iterations of the model. As far as it stands right now, the new reach and frequency approach, and also I should mention for anyone who's an API user or anything like that, our 2.2 API, our new API infrastructure, that and the new reach and frequency approach will be coming with the upcoming 2023 forecast. And that's something that we're going to be releasing end of October, early November as a preview for our members. And then that'll become official in the start of the new year. So a lot of different moving pieces with that. But yeah, so that's kind of a general update on that.
But also to just maybe to the essence of the heart of the question too, I think that's a really helpful kind of insight. Is it what's in the production, which is the Insight Suite itself, it's still the best available model available.
Yes.
So it would continue to use it and continue to move forward with it because it is the best, based on the best available data we have and best available modeling we have at this point. We're working to improve it, but right now that's where it is. And hopefully in the next handful of weeks, as I said, as Brian inferred, with the next release in November, that should be part of the release.
So before I keep going, just want to make sure there are no other questions.
Yeah, so, and I think this is something you were getting to. There was a question that was submitted yesterday, just kind of reiterating it, about using the Places module to kind of filter down and look at inventory around a set of places?
Yes.
Or-
Yep. That's definitely something I'll do that one at the end if I have some time. I want to show because there was one more question I got beforehand that I wanted to just address with this other upload, or this other scenario, but I can definitely touch on the places real quick at the end if we have some time.
Yep.
So let me really quick, I'm going to switch my screen sharing so you can see. I have this, give me 1 second. Okay, new share. Sorry, bear with me a sec. Okay, so I have this example that I have here, basically born of a question that was, I have a campaign that's a multi-market campaign, and I have varying flight dates. And you can see I've got, 4 different markets here. So Atlanta, Lansing, Michigan, Green Bay, and Columbus, Ohio. And I've got these differing flight dates, like some of the ones even within a single market. If we're looking at these here, there's these run for 2 weeks, these run for about a month and a half. These run for a month and a half, but separately. So there's kind of all these varying different flight dates here. Say you have a campaign that's like this. There are 2 different ways that you can set up a campaign that has varying flight dates, or even just kind of an odd date. Like say there's one board that does not run the full length or runs a subset of the other ones. Basically, there are 2 different ways that you can do it. One requires a little bit more setup on the front end, but is a quicker overall process. And then the other one requires a little bit more work on the back end in the tool after you've run the plan. So this CSV that I have right here, and it's important that it's saved as a CSV. But basically, all you'll need to do is have a file that has a Geopath ID, a start date, and an end date. And so I'm going to go back over to the Insight Suite. Share. Okay, Scott, are you seeing the Insight Suite again?
Yes, you're good to go.
I was on mute. Yes, we are.
Okay, so let me go back to the workspace here. Again, projects or sandbox, doesn't totally matter where you start your work. So I'm going to, again, this is an inventory plan. And earlier I was saying there are 4 different ways that you can add your inventory, and I skipped over this from file option basically until right now. So this is where I can upload that CSV that I've been working on. So let me find that. Hold on. Let me find it a different way.
And Brian, as you're finding that, is there a cap on the total number of lines you can use when you're uploading this file?
That's a good question. I'm sure there is. I have never run into it myself. If it's like some of the other inventory caps in the system, like if I had to guess, it's probably about in the range of 15,000 spots, but I'm not positive off the top of my head. So I'm going to drag this file in right here. There we go. Dragging the file in. So on the next stage, when you hit apply selections, it's going to bring up this page that's going to give you a way to map out the headers. So spot ID, you can see Geopath ID is there, start date, end date. And then it's important, I should mention, while you're doing this kind of plan setup, if you're doing a from file upload, and it does tell you up here, as soon as you hit this save option, it's going to start running your plan. So I actually kind of, I set a bad example for myself here. Maybe it's a good example. I want to set up my audience first. So I'm going to we can do 18 plus, and I'll do 18 to 34 again as well. But once you hit or initiate that plan running, it won't let you come back and do this until after the fact. Like I said, you can always edit your plans in that parameters section. But once I add the inventory here, it's not going to let me go back and add my audience. So from file, let me find that. Oops, sorry, 1 sec. Okay, apply selections. Okay, and again, Geopath ID, start date, and end date. Save.
And just while it's doing that, Brian, it's going to automatically sniff out the markets as well.
Exactly. Yep. On this next page, as soon as I hit OK, basically, in the same way that when you paste in your IDs or as you pull in an inventory set, it's going to ask you how you want to assign the market for those units. So I know these are several different markets. I don't want to group them together because I'm not trying to make like one large geography. I want 4 different geographies. So DMA, and I'm going to hit add as individual. And this will then separate this out into each of those 4 different markets. And because I did this from file upload and I've matched the start date and end dates, this will then know to only run these boards for whatever dates I put in here. And again, there's a second way that you can do this that's a little bit more manual on the back end, but, and I realize we're coming near the end of the hour here. So once this plan runs, I can just quickly show.
And just as it is running, the metrics are associated with those flight dates, right? So as stuff, is longer or shorter, the reach, the frequency, the total impressions are all represented by, it takes into account the different flight dates.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Specifically. Yep.
Great. Yep.
And you can, like I said, the second way that you can do this a little bit more manual, but you can go and make edits after the fact. So like maybe one of the units, for example, you don't want to run the entire, I don't know, month and a half or whatever it is. You can change the campaign length for just that one unit if you want to, and then here, let me see if this is done. I think it might be. Yeah, you can change the campaign length for just one unit and then go about it that way and sort of make edits so it would just, when you redo it, perfect, here we go. So this is actually a good example of what I wanted to show. So I've got variations in both market and audience. So I have 2 different audiences and for each of these markets. So you can see 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, all the way down to 4B. So each of these is a separate plan. It's separated all of my units out into their appropriate markets. And again, this is all just based on that list of IDs with the dates. So let's open up this one, for example. This might be, honestly, going back to what we were talking about earlier, you might need to add this as a column. So if you go to media detail view, it'll probably be down here. There's a period dates and a total days column you can add over. And when you drag that over, it splits it into a start date and an end date. So I've done that already, and I have 2. But if I scroll all the way over, because you could put these anywhere in your column order. This is just where I put mine. But you can see these boards go for these dates. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me look at the Atlanta market. I want to do that because I know that one had a few different dates within it. So let me scroll over. So here we go. Perfect. So this one goes from October 1st to November 15th. This one goes from October 15th to November 30th. But say, like, for example, maybe this first one, maybe it's not available as of October 1st, or maybe it is designed to start later. Maybe the 25th is when it should actually start. You can make a change like that, and you can do this spot by spot. And again, this is that more tedious way to do it, but you can go and make edits like it can even kind of be 2 dates per thing. So maybe this goes from October 1st to the 19th, and then this can go from November 1st to November 15th. And so you can have 2 different sets of dates all within one board here, all within the same plan. So then once I have made those edits, I can just hit this recalculate measures button, and this will then rerun this based on just the active dates that I have in here.
And just a subtle clarification too. It is looking at the dates and it's looking at the total days, and it's using the total days for the metrics, in terms of rather than October 15th, 19th, it's knowing that that is whatever, 18 days, and then there's 15 days with the other, I'm doing my math wrong, but it's total of 34 days. So just a point of clarification.
Well, I also believe that there is a bit of a seasonal switch to that, because if you've ever looked on our impression variation dashboard or no, just that, I was going to say the mobility as well, but if you've looked at the impression variation dashboard, as of this 2021 mid-year forecast that we've been using, there is a bit of a monthly fluctuation, just kind of based on, in part that was based on how we built the forecast to account for COVID recovery, but there is a slight fluctuation and seasonality in the month-to-month data. So it might give you a slight different, like if it was 22 days in July versus 22 days in October and November, you might get slightly a different delivery, not drastically, but for the most part, it is just kind of, it is pretty standardized there.
Yeah, I think,
so-
and I think that's really based on day types, so Monday through Thursday versus Friday, Saturday, Sundays. and
Yes.
move on to different day types that occur within those set of days. I know we're at the top of the hour. So Brian, was there anything else you had related to this question that you wanted to?
No, that was everything I had prepared.
So I know there was that question we didn't get to yet. If Brian, are you okay? Just doing a quick run through of how to do
Yeah,
a little
sure.
point of interest and a filter down. So if people want to stay on, great. I'll just do the quick goodbyes if you don't have time to stay on. Just want to say thank you for joining us and for all the questions. We hope this worked for everybody, like hopefully it was more interactive and ultimately more useful because we're answering your specific questions that you need to answer versus kind of a scenario that we came up with. So we'll continue to do this periodically throughout the year because again, just the number of people that signed up and joined and stayed on as long as it did shows us that these are important sessions. This will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. If you go to Geek Out Library, the Geek Out tab, and just scroll down, you'll see all of our webinars and most recent webinars there. But you can always also go to our YouTube channel. And also, I'm going to put it in the chat, but I had a slide here. I'm just not going to share it because I don't want to take the time. But if you ever have any other questions, geekout@geopath.org or any question. And if you have any questions, Brian, Luke, and myself are the ones that monitor it. Will be. Thank you for putting that in the chat, Brian. We're the ones monitoring that, and we'll go from there. So, Brian, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, sure. I'll do this really quick. So while you're in Explorer, the default view of Explorer is actually something called this inventory library. And if I click on this, I have these other options here. So if I go to Places Library, this is where I can actually find different points of interest. You can't currently upload your own, which is a question that we've gotten a lot, and that's a feature that we're working on for the future. But this lets you search through a bunch of different places across the full US. And basically what you do is you do a national search at first. So I'll just do like Subway sandwiches. I think somebody actually asked a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it does like a national search. What I like to do here is go to this More Location Tools. And once I'm able to open this up, I can then search for like a specific geography. So I'm just going to keep it to the St. Louis DMA since that's what we were just doing. But sorry, just give it a second. St. Louis County DMA. Perfect. So refine. And now it's going to constrain my search to just whatever geography I put in. So it's like there are maybe 250-ish results. So yeah, 253. So and you know what, just for the sake of let me do county. It's a little bit easier, it's a little bit smaller. Let's do St. Louis County. There's two St. Louis. Let's do that one. St. Louis County, 22, much easier. So we've got 22, and if I click on this option here, I can actually see the addresses as well. So what I'm going to do is save this as a new place set, just like how you can save an inventory set to your account. But so I'll call this Subway.
And similarly, if you didn't want all 22 of those, if you had specific 12 restaurants, you can just click them on and off and create the subset.
Okay, so I've saved that to my account. So I'm going to go back to the regular view of the Explore module, and you can do that with the same drop-down thing you used to get here, or you can just click on the Explore icon on the left-hand side of the map, or on the left-hand bar. And now what I can do, earlier, just as an aside, I was talking about all these mappable layers that you can have. You can do that with your inventory sets, but you can also map out places. Like if you want to overlay groups of inventory and then groups of places and have them be like different color-coded things on your map, and you can change the shape and reorder them so they stack on top of each other. So that's a nice additional kind of feature that you can do. But in the Filter Inventory tab under Location, I can actually use my place set. So filter by place set and radius. I can use this to filter to a specific Subway location, St. Louis County. So there's that group of 22, and I want to do it, let's do 2 miles of each place. So you could set this to whatever it is, but this will basically put a separate radius around each of the places in that location filter or in that place set. And so now we can then go in and look and see. Here we go. And again, I'm actually just going to clean this up really quick, get the unselected units off the map just for clarity's sake. And you can see, I mean, quite a bit of overlap. They're very closely grouped in this area. Usually at like in a major city, I'm not surprised to see how close they are, but like you can see 2 miles might not even be worth doing in a place like this. If it were more of a rural area, then maybe doing like 2 miles might be useful. Maybe 1 mile is better here. But basically, you're then working off of only the stuff that's within a 2 mile radius of each of these locations. So every bit of filtering that I do beyond this, like if I go based on media type or operator or whatever it is, that'll only be working from here. So this will start, this is kind of the first filter now that I can use. And everything I do beyond this filtering will go just based on this. Any other questions while we still have a sec?
No, that's it. So I really appreciate you, the walkthrough, Brian. I thought it was great. There's still a handful of people on, so thank you for staying with us. And you know, if you do have any other questions, feel free to try to throw them in the chat quickly, but maybe reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org. Like I said earlier, this will be on our website very shortly as well.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.